Where did we leave off? So we talked about the permission to take any valid ijtihad. It's not blasphemy if you said one way or another way when it comes to the ijtihad. This ijtihad, this is from the revelations, not something the scholars made up. If you hear some people talk about the formulation of madhabs in our religion, they talk about it like it's something that the scholars came up with, as opposed to something that the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions in the first place. The fact that he taught them how to make ijtihad, that in itself intrinsically, automatically means that he taught them about madhabs. Because by teaching them about ijtihad, that means they're going to sometimes differ in their ijtihad. They know that, and that's what happened to them, the Sahaba. Amongst the companions who became mujtahids, they differed. So this means they had madhabs. Even if one of them didn't have followers, let's just, for argument's sake, had a companion of the Prophet ﷺ been a mujtahid without followers, he still has his own madhab. By virtue of the fact that he makes his own ijtihad, and perhaps another mujtahid differs with him, so that's two madhabs. It's not the followers that make the madhab. You can take any valid ijtihad. So we talked about that issue. We've reached then the second rule, al-qa'idatu thaniyah. And the subtitle here is sacrilege. Sacrilege means disrespect in religion, though. Disrespecting what is religiously respectable. Dishonoring what is religiously sanctified, what is religiously holy and glorified. Here's the rule. The Shaykh says, may Allah have mercy on him, any saying, action, or conviction having disrespect for God, his prophets, his books, his angels, his rules, his promise, his threat, the symbols, that means signs, of his religion, or his verses of his Quran, his verses, here where it says of his Quran, we can put that in parentheses. Well, I think it's clear. I think it doesn't need to have of his Quran. If I think well of some Muslims who would encounter this, then, which is my preference to think well of them, then I'm going to think that they understand what this means, doesn't need the parentheses. But on the other hand, some people, they send me some questions. I have two choices. To think that they're playing games with me, or to think that they have some issue in their minds. Anyway, when that does happen, though, a lot of times I prefer to think a person's playing games with me. That's, for me, is thinking better of him. Because it means he's not slow, for example. So, this is the rule that the Shaykh mentioned, and if you've learned the summary of obligatory knowledge, then this rule is familiar to you. Any saying, action, or conviction having disrespect for God, his prophets, his books, his angels, his rules, his promise, his threat, the symbols of his religion, or his verses is blasphemy. So, I'm going to erase this part of his Quran, and I will leave it to the intelligence of the one who's taking this information, or reading the book. What does his promise mean? His promise, wa'duhu, is to admit the believers, those who die as believers, into the garden. What is his threat? It is to punish the sinners. What are the symbols of his religion? Those are the signs of his religion, like the adhan and the khimar of the Muslimah, and like the beard of the Muslim, and the congregational prayer, and the Kaaba itself, and the masjids. These are signs of the religion. So that's something broad. When someone disrespects the signs of the religion, this is blasphemy. Yani, for me, if someone called Muslims towel heads, for me that's blasphemy. Is disrespecting the symbols of the religion. So if somebody doesn't think it's blasphemy, I don't know what does he understand from it, or if he can convince me that it's not blasphemy. Just like if someone makes fun of the beard, not my beard, not some person's beard, but the beard, abstractly and generally, broadly, for the Muslims I'm talking about, then that's blasphemy. Or someone disrespects the khimar in general, not some woman's khimar in particular, that's blasphemy. That's why when I heard them calling, some people calling Muslims towel heads, then for me that's blasphemy. Okay. Now, I told you this booklet has 8 rules. And then I told you that these rules, these 8 rules, they have under them rules. So it's really like more than 8 rules. The Shaykh condensed these cases into 8 rules. This first paragraph that we read right here, it covers the 3 types of blasphemy: saying, action, or conviction. Uh, but it also covers a broad type of blasphemy, which is the sacrilege. That's why that this subtitle is here. Sacrilege is a kind of blasphemy, so here's a rule that covers that. This kind of blasphemy transcends sayings, actions, and convictions. In the summary of obligatory knowledge, we have learned that, and in other books too, it's not just there, that the blasphemy, this is a consensus of the 4 schools, that blasphemy is sayings, actions, and convictions. Those 3 types can all fall under this broader type of sacrilege, which is, the Arabic word is istighfaf. But I feel like the word sacrilege is underused by our brothers and sisters. I want to look up this word sacrilege real quick here. Sacrilege. This is from American Dictionary of the English Language. Supposed to be from the year 1828. It says sacrilege, the crime of violating or profaning sacred things. Yeah. Or the alienating to laymen or to common purposes what has been appropriated or consecrated to religious persons or uses. Not that. Just the first part here. The crime of violating or profaning sacred things. Sacred things means religiously respectable things, or even holy things, religiously holy things. So then from there, the Shaykh went to zero in on the blasphemous expressions, blasphemous words. Why I said zero in? Because he mentioned any saying, action, or conviction. So he's not talking about sayings only. He's talking about something in this first paragraph broader than sayings. But then he zeroed in to talk about sayings in particular. And he's going to talk about not sacrilege in particular. So under the second rule, he talks about the blasphemy of sacrilege generally. And he talks about the rules of blasphemous wordings. So that's 2 different cases under The second rule. And we'll see what else the Shaykh might have here. He says, Rahimahullah, the scholars divided the blasphemy causing expressions, the blasphemy causing expressions, yani the expressions that cause blasphemy. They divided them into seeming blasphemy, what seems to be blasphemy, what appears to be blasphemy, and explicit blasphemy. We usually use the word apparent. We usually say apparent blasphemy. But I like to switch the words up sometimes. I think it helps with comprehension. So, seeming, one of the meanings of seeming is apparent. What appears to be blasphemy was not necessarily blasphemy, just seems to be, at least seems to be. It could be really blasphemy, but it doesn't have to be blasphemy, so it does seem to be. It appears to be blasphemy. That's one type of expression. And explicit blasphemy, which means the statement can only mean blasphemy, can't mean anything else. Now here it says, apparent is that which, according to how the language is put forth, can be taken two or more ways. So here, this translation is using two words. Here it says seeming, that means apparent. Here it says apparent, that means seeming. So just switching the words up to with the goal of broadening your comprehension here. Hopefully, that's the intended goal of switching the words there. Apparent, an apparent statement of blasphemy is that which, according to how the language is put forth, can be taken two or more ways. But the blasphemous meaning stands out. That's why it's called apparent blasphemy. It appears to be blasphemy. The blasphemous meaning stands out. ولكنه إلى المعنى الكفري أقرب. Okay, I think that's a nice translation. Explicit blasphemy. Well, we can remove the word blasphemy here. It's not in the Arabic. وأما الصريح, as for the explicit, explicit has only one meaning. وليس له بحسب وضع اللغة. Has only one meaning concerning how the language was put forth. Any language. It's not about Arabic in particular. Any language. The explicit is what has only one meaning concerning how that language was put forth. And that meaning is blasphemy, because that's our topic. We're talking about blasphemy here. We're not talking about divorce, explicit divorce or non-explicit divorce, or explicit confession or not, or something else, or explicit statement of a sale. We're talking about blasphemy here. So apparent is that which according to how the language is put forth can be taken two or more ways. But the blasphemous meaning stands out, because we're talking about blasphemy here. And explicit has only one meaning concerning how the language was put forth. And that meaning is blasphemy. How long I've been muted now? The class never started?
You weren't muted.
Oh, I wasn't muted? Okay.
No.
Okay, it looks like I just muted myself. Not up until this very moment, I wasn't muted. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So, apparent blasphemy, like what? Like if someone says, It's in God's hands. So what appears to someone is that he's attributing organs to Allah. That doesn't have to mean that. So it's not explicit. Explicit blasphemy is like if someone were to say, I hate God. You don't say to him, what do you mean? You say to him, that's blasphemy. And when we say, according to how the language was put forth, means you need to consider each language on its own. And when it comes to blasphemous expressions, be mindful before you attempt to merely translate something that was said in one language and then ask about it in another language. Like someone who insists on asking me about blasphemy or statements, not blasphemy, statements that were said in Urdu. I don't know Urdu. And then you put it into English and you ask me. So how do I know that this person who spoke in Urdu, how do I know that the language, for example, the Arabic word yad, is it an exact match for the English word hand? It's not an exact match. They have meanings in common. Both of them can mean the organ. Both of them can mean power. But do they all mean the same thing? I mean, does yet all of its meanings match 100% with all the meanings of the English word hand? No. So they're not exact matches. That's why we don't say yad of Allah means hand of Allah. And then to say, but hand doesn't have to mean organ, so we're just going to use the word hand. No. Yeah, hand doesn't have to be an organ in English, that's true. But the word hand is not 100% equivalent to the word yad, so that it is sufficient to be a placeholder for it, to stand in its place. So keep that in mind. Rather, learn your language, whatever language you speak, whatever languages you speak. Learn your language. And learn the formal version of your language too. If your language has a formal standard version and a slang version, it's a good chance you know the slang common way to talk like the people do. Learn also the standard formal language version of the language. And what can help you is to read books. I'm not talking about reading books to learn religion. I'm talking about reading literature, for example. Old books, stories, things like that. Will give you power, more power. It will strengthen you in language. For example, someone sent me a question. There's an ayah. The ayah, it uses the word innama. Innama. Innama in Arabic is for hasr, limitation. Basically means merely. Merely means only. So the meaning of the ayah is your task, your assignment, O Muhammad, is merely conveyance. So someone who English is not his first language, and I think he doesn't know Arabic also, he asked me, said, but is this right? Can you say merely? Doesn't the Prophet have other duties too besides conveying? Well, what's this question here? What's the source of this question here? And you might have the same question. What's the source of that? The source of that is weakness in the language. Because doesn't mean you don't have another task, O Muhammad. Merely your job is to convey. This does not mean you don't have another job, O Muhammad. It doesn't mean that. Neither in Arabic when it's put forth. How it's put forth in Arabic, it doesn't mean he doesn't have another job. And how it's put forth in English, translating it as merely, or even if we put only, but it was merely, it does not mean he doesn't have another job. And that person was saying, in my language, it's saying, and I wouldn't be surprised if in his language also does not mean he doesn't have another job. But that rather probably his case is a weakness of language in the first place. English language, Arabic language, and probably his own language too. Wouldn't you say, for example, I'm only telling you I'm only telling you, I'm merely the messenger. Yani, I'm merely telling you the issue. I'm only delivering the message to you. Yani, you're telling someone something. I'm merely letting you know. Well, you are doing something else too. Aren't you standing? Aren't you breathing? Aren't you looking at him? So doesn't mean I'm not doing anything else whatsoever, but because of a weakness in language, one would not understand. Any questions so far? So what's the difference between, well, we know the difference between apparent blasphemy and explicit blasphemy. In terms of their definitions, we know their difference. The apparent blasphemy can go more than one way as far as the language is put forth. The explicit blasphemy only has one way as far as how the language is put forth. So, do they have different rules then? Yes. Now we want to know, when are you going to try to figure out what a person meant? And when you're not going to try to figure out what he meant? What's his intention? This subtitle answers that. Intent is sought for what seems to be blasphemy, not what is explicit blasphemy. Intent means, what did you mean? The intent is sought for what seems to be blasphemy, but it doesn't have to be blasphemy, so we want to know what you meant. And you don't have to ask the person what he meant. It's not a condition. Yani, the rule is, you cannot deem a person as a kafir for what merely seems to be blasphemy. You cannot deem a person as a kafir for what merely seems to be blasphemy, but could mean something else. So then, if someone says something that's not a clear blasphemy, it's not clear explicit blasphemy, there is no need to be confused. But the people, oh, yani, they stay confused here. What do I do? What do I do? Are you sure it's clear blasphemy? No. Okay, then don't deem him as a kafir. You're not allowed to. So should I ask him? If you want to, you don't have to. Also, you might want to leave well enough alone. Or if you are concerned enough, you will say something. Look into your situation. Do I want to be sure that this one didn't commit blasphemy because this is my beloved one and I cannot bear the thought of this one being a kafir? Let me say something. Let me clarify for him the rules here and let him know that if he meant blasphemy, he has to say the shahada. Or is this person someone that I am not going to argue with? I'm not going to have long drawn out conversation with. And it is not to my benefit to be deeming this person as a kafir when I don't have to. And I'm just going to leave well enough alone with the meaning that I'm not going to deem him as a kafir. I'm not going to ask him any questions here. And I'm just going to keep it pushing. That might be your way also. What do those two ways have in common? You cannot deem him as a kafir for what merely seems to be blasphemy. They said, who's they? The scholars. I could put a footnote here. They means the scholars. Do I anticipate someone not knowing what this is supposed to mean? Yeah. They said, therefore, anyone who says what seems to express blasphemy, what has two or more meanings, one of which rushes to the mind, which is the blasphemous meaning, that's the one that rushes to the mind, that's the one that stands out, and the other does not, then such a speaker is not judged as a disbeliever unless his intent becomes clear. Unless his intent becomes clear. It's possible that it would be clear for you. It's possible. How so? It could be that he said a statement that is not explicit, but the context, yani all of what you are talking about, all of what you are saying, makes you know his intent. The context directs his seeming statement of blasphemy to the blasphemous meaning for you. And then you'd say, this is blasphemy. And he might say, nah, this statement doesn't have to be blasphemy. It could mean this or that. You're going to say, but it doesn't mean this or that here because we're talking about this. So since we are talking about this, then how are you going to say that statement and tell me it could mean such and such? Doesn't make any sense. So if the intention is sought for what seems to be blasphemy, not explicit, you don't seek the intention for explicit blasphemy. If someone were to say, I hate God, you don't say, what do you mean? Then what do you seek for an explicit statement? You're going to seek his comprehension. What do you understand? What do you understand from this word? Not what do you mean by this word, what do you understand from this word? And what this means is that it is not valid to assign meanings to words. It's not valid. We do not accept. Because if you allow people to assign their own meanings to words, then you will dismantle the chapter of blasphemy altogether. And other chapters too. Chapters pertaining to statements, cases pertaining to statements, like marriage and divorce and confession and other things that require statements. If you allow someone to assign any meaning he wants to any word, then you will dismantle the religion. And also, if you practice what's being said to you here in terms of recognizing what seems to mean something and recognizing what definitely means something, then no one's going to play word games with you. Unless you're soft and you let people run over you. Then someone's going to be talking in circles around you. Or, insulting your intelligence. Talking to you as if you do not understand what's going on. But then if you don't say something, he's going to think you got away with that, or he might take advantage of you. And sometimes you might let someone get away with that. There's reasons. For the sake of Allah, He might let someone think he's taking advantage of you. You don't have to say something always. That time when you let someone think he's taking advantage of you, you just hold that. Don't worry. Inshallah is going to come back for you. Inshallah, you know what I mean by that. To give you an example, and this is digression here, it was said that when one of the companions used to see one of his slaves, he had many slaves. When he would see one of his slaves being diligent in worship, he would set him free. So he was setting slaves free. One person said to him, "Don't you see they aren't just treating you like you are naive. They aren't just acting like they do worship so you can set them free." He said, "Let them fool us. It's okay. Let them go ahead and treat me like I'm naive one. Let them engage in the worships so that I can set them free." So when it's explicit statement, then what do you seek? If you want to seek anything, you're going to seek not his intention. What did you mean? You're going to seek his comprehension. What do you understand from this word? What do you think this word means? Not what did you mean? Anyone who says an expression explicit in blasphemy is deemed as a blasphemer. But it's not an obligation to rush. It is permissible to ponder and to consider his case that maybe he doesn't know what he's saying. Maybe he doesn't understand. Not he didn't mean it. It's not he didn't mean it. And this is what a lot of people, subhanAllah, they think if they didn't mean something, then it doesn't, it's okay. No. Doesn't matter if you didn't mean it. You said it. Tell me you didn't mean it. You said it. So I'm not asking you what you meant. I'm asking you what you understand. This is what our religion taught us. If someone says explicit statement of blasphemy, he blasphemes. If someone says, what did the Prophet say? This hadith sums up what I want to say. ثلاث جدهن جد وهزلهن جد. Three things. Their seriousness is serious. And their joking around is serious. Their seriousness is serious, and their joking around is serious. النكاح والطلاق والرجعة. Marriage, divorce, and reinstating the wife. The Shaykh taught us, if this is the case of marriage and divorce and reinstating the wife, then what would be the case of blasphemy? For sure, when it is serious, it's serious. And even if it's joking, it's serious. Anyone who says an expression explicit in blasphemy is deemed as a blasphemer. Yani, unless you are pausing. When you are pausing here, it's not because you're doubting if he's a kafir or not. When you pause here, what you are saying is, this is definitely blasphemy, but I want to just confirm that he knows what he's saying. Such a person is neither asked to clarify his intention, nor is any reinterpretation acceptable. You don't ask him, what did you mean? And when he says, what I meant was, and then it just means something off the walls, yani something that it doesn't really mean, you're going to say, no, that statement doesn't mean that. So you say, but that's what I meant. You're going to say, but it doesn't mean that. He's going to say, but that's what I meant though. You're going to say, but it doesn't mean that though. إلا أن يكون لا يعرف أن هذا اللفظ معناه صريح في الكفر. However, in case he happens not to know that this expression is explicit in blasphemy, he thinks it has some other non-blasphemous meaning. Yani he mistakenly thinks Now, I think I don't need that in. If I wanted to put it in parentheses, I just want to see what it looks like. Mistakenly, he mistakenly thinks, he erroneously thinks it has some non-blasphemous meaning, but we don't need that there. I think it's clear without it. Then for this person, this expression is not judged as explicit for him. In reference to him only, it's like a non-explicit statement because he doesn't know its true meaning. An example of this is what some people say. They say nothing exists but God. That's explicit blasphemy. Because that's basically saying the whole world is God, because the whole world exists. That's a way of saying God and the world are one and the same. That's explicit blasphemy. Or they say God is everything. That's how Christians talk. Or some people who call themselves quote unquote spiritual, not willing to commit to anything. These expressions are explicit blasphemy by their meanings and the language. They mean that the world is God. However, some people do not understand this meaning. They think this means that Allah is manager of everything. That Allah is the one who controls everything. It says manager, I want to use the word controller, because I think that's closer to what someone would say. Someone might say, no, I'm saying Allah, God, He's the one who controls everything. People like that are not deemed as disbelievers if they said this statement. But, Yani, how are you going to know? Well, first of all, now you've learned. So when you hear something like this, you might pause. Say, maybe, let me see. Maybe he doesn't know what he's saying. This is explicit blasphemy, but this seems like some of those things we learned about. Maybe this guy doesn't know what he's saying. Do you know what this means? You say, what? You say, this means such and such. You say, no. Then you're going to say, okay, so he doesn't know what it means. Good thing I didn't rush. You tell him, yes, it does mean that. Don't say that. That's blasphemy. It's explicit blasphemy. Instead, they are forbidden from that, and the corruption that this word means should be clarified for whoever said it. They think it means something different from how those who first said it meant it. They understand from it that God and the world are unified. Those who first said these statements, they said, La mawjuda illallah, and they said, Allahu huwa al-kull. So they said, nothing exists but God. And they said, God is everything. The people who originally coined these phrases, they meant that God and the world are unified. Those people, their belief is called pantheism. Pantheism. Pantheism is when someone believes that God and the world are unified as one thing, that God is everything, which is really a kind of atheism. Pantheism is a kind of atheism. Dwell on that. Think about that. Maybe it will become clear for you, or if you want to ask me later, not today, then we can see. Those people make God and the world to be the same thing. Those are indeed deemed as disbelievers. Wallahu alam. I think this is a fine place to stop.